The station wagon was once a common sight on roads across America and in many parts of the world. Known for its practicality in space, it became the preferred vehicle for families during the mid-20th century. It served everyday needs without drawing much attention. Simple, functional, and reliable. But despite its usefulness and popularity, the station wagon eventually faded from mainstream use. Its decline was swift, driven by changing consumer preferences, market trends, and the rise of competing vehicle types. Let's look at what made the station wagon so dominant for so long and why it disappeared almost as quickly as it rose. The roots of the station wagon can be traced back to the 1920s and 30s when utility cars called depot hacks were used to carry people and luggage from train stations. These wooden-framed vehicles were practical, rugged, and modest. But it wasn't until after World War II that the station wagon truly came into its own. In post-war America, a booming economy, the GI Bill, and the growth of suburban housing created a new kind of family. Upwardly mobile, car-owning, travel-ready. These families needed space for kids, groceries, camping trips, and weekend outings. The sedan was too small. The pickup truck too crude. Enter the station wagon. With its stretched-out body, foldable rear seats, rear hatch access, and generous cargo space, the station wagon was a revelation. It was everything a growing family needed and nothing they didn't. The wagon featured heavily in films, TV shows, and advertisements. In sitcoms, it was the trusted family chariot. In ads, it was portrayed with smiling children, cheerful dogs, and perfectly packed picnic baskets. The image was clear. The wagon was safe, dependable, and comforting. By the mid-1960s, 1 in every 5 cars sold in the US was a station wagon. Station wagons were incredibly practical. Unlike today's SUVs or crossovers, they had a low center of gravity, making them stable and easier to drive. They could haul cargo like a truck, seat people like a van, and still drive like a car. Many models had third-row seating, which turned the wagon into a 7 or even 9-passenger vehicle. And with the rear seats folded down, it could transform into a temporary moving van, a mobile tent, or even a date-night hideaway. Here's how it declined. The 1973 oil crisis shook America. Suddenly, fuel economy mattered. Big V8 powered wagons began to feel bloated, inefficient, and expensive to run. As the price of gas soared, smaller cars gained popularity. Japanese automakers like Toyota and Honda entered the US market with nimble, efficient alternatives that challenged American carmakers to rethink size and purpose. And those station wagons adapted, with smaller engines, lighter frames, and sleeker designs. The cultural tide was beginning to turn. By the late 1970s and early 80s, new generations of drivers were coming of age. They didn't want a car their parents drove. They wanted something cool, adventurous. They wanted height, command, and attitude. They didn't want practicality, they wanted presence. In the 1980s and early 90s, a new breed of vehicle emerged, the SUV. It started with rugged, utility-first vehicles like the Jeep Cherokee and Toyota Land Cruiser, but quickly evolved into more family-friendly versions like the Ford Explorer and the Chevrolet Tahoe. SUVs offered much of what wagons did. Cargo room, space for kids, but added something wagons lacked: image. SUVs were marketed not as family transport, but as a lifestyle statement. They were shown climbing mountains, driving through rivers, surviving blizzards. They were cool. They made drivers feel more powerful and more in control. SUVs sat higher, looked tougher, and gave parents the illusion of safety and adventure, even if they never left the paved road. In an era obsessed with self-image and consumer choice, the SUV stole the wagon's soul and rebranded it with charisma. By the mid-1990s, the station wagon's image problem was undeniable. It was no longer the vehicle of choice. Worse, it had become a visual cue for boring, dated, or uncool. Car companies responded not by defending the wagon, but by renaming it. Subaru's Outback was a wagon, but they called it a sport utility. Volvo stopped saying wagon and replaced it with sports wagon. Audi created the all-road and carefully avoided the W word. The label itself had become poison. Even as the actual body style lived on in disguise, the term station wagon was scrubbed from brochures and commercials. Another nail in the coffin was money. Automakers realized that SUVs and crossovers were built on similar platforms but sold at higher prices. It brought in more profit. Why sell a wagon for $25,000 when you could sell a similarly built SUV for $35,000? And the public was happy to pay more. Leasing made expensive cars more accessible. Resale values of SUVs held up better. Manufacturers shifted their production focus. Sedans were phased out. Wagons became limited editions or dealer-only orders. One by one, models like the Ford Taurus wagon, the Buick Roadmaster, and the Dodge Magnum disappeared. By the early 2000s, the traditional station wagon was nearly extinct in the American market. Yet the story doesn't end in total death. In Europe, wagons, called estate cars, remain popular. They're seen as stylish, efficient, and practical alternatives to bulky SUVs. In the US, the wagon survives in niche corners. High-performance models like the Audi RS6 Avant, luxurious options from Volvo and Mercedes-Benz, and beloved cult favorites like the Subaru Outback. But for most Americans, the station wagon now exists only in memory, a symbol of a different time, when utility mattered more than ego, and when families needed space more than swagger. So why did the station wagon dominate the road, only to disappear so suddenly? Because times have changed, lifestyles shifted, marketing evolved. People began to care less about what a car could do and more about what it said about them. But it didn't die in disgrace. It did its job for decades, carried generations, and shaped the way Americans traveled. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more.